What's up, YouTube? I got a request to make a Deathstroke mask like this. This particular one is up on the Etsy shop, but this is the one we're going to be making in the video, which is essentially the same pattern. Only difference being I painted it a little bit different, and honestly this one didn't come out as well. The screen had a little hiccup here. This one, of course, is much cleaner, but still, same concept. I'm not perfect. This is the one I'm going to keep for myself for my own cosplay. And I am going to be remaking the full Deathstroke cosplay with the exception of the sword here, which I already have a video on the channel for if you want to check out how I made this Deathstroke katana. And in the following months I will be doing armor and gauntlets and spats and all kinds of stuff for this cosplay that I'm working on. But today we're just doing this. And something I want to point out real quick before I get into the list of materials and the patterns and all that is the fact that this, you can see through this eye on the inside of the mask itself. There is an eye hole, there is some tulle, and there is this mesh covering it up. You can leave your pattern solid, and I also talk about this at least one other time throughout the video, but I really want to impress the fact that if you cover one eye and you wear this constantly at a convention, your eyesight gets off balanced and rather messed up. And if you have to drive home after this, you're going to need some time to readjust so you can see properly to drive a car if you have one eye completely covered. Even having one eye shaded like this and one eye open still can mess with your vision. So always be careful and always be safe whenever you're cosplaying. Alright, so I showed a Deathstroke mask recently and I got a lot of requests to do a video on it. And this is a pretty quick, easier thing to cram in, I feel like. As far as requests and things like that goes, I'm trying to get mine and my family's cosplays ready for Comic-Con. One of the things you're going to need is some sort of screen or fabric. This actually came off of an old laundry basket, so yeah, that's that. And I'm also going to be using a heat gun, contact cement, and also super glue, Mod Podge to seal it with, or you can use Plastidip. I prefer to use Mod Podge on this particular project. Things to cut with. I got an exacto knife and scissors, one the other, preferably just have both lying around, and of course the patterns. And there's only 3 pieces for each side, which is kind of cool. When you look at the finished pictures of it and the video I think that I showed up, it looks like there's layered plates over it. It's not. I just glued the foam offset. And you don't necessarily have to do this, but I use a hot glue gun to seal the inside of the mask of the seams after I glue everything fully together, and I've heated everything, but we'll get into that later. And patterns, you're going to need patterns. You can get patterns off of the Facebook page. I usually take photos of them on a 12-inch by 18-inch sheet of EVA foam for scale, so you can print those out at home. Or if you want to purchase cardstock patterns, you can purchase them on Etsy as well. I'm working on getting digital patterns up. I keep getting requests for people who are outside the US for digital patterns, so I will hopefully have those up soon. As soon as I have time to work on it. With Easter and visiting my parents, have been real busy, so sorry about that. But to jump into the build, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out all my pattern pieces. And for curved areas, I like to use an exacto knife with a curved blade. But to cut out these little wedges and stuff, I usually use a nice sharp pair of scissors. I feel like that's much easier. That's just my own personal preference. Now that I have all of my pieces cut out, I need to start gluing them together. And to glue these together, I am going to use contact cement. Sorry, this bottle is really beat up. And the way it works is you apply it to the surfaces to be glued. You wait 15 minutes and then you bond them together. You just stick them together. The thing is, as soon as you put them together, they're stuck. So if you put it together crooked, there's no work time. You have to have it lined up the first time. And the first thing I'm going to apply the contact cement to is these V pieces here and here on both side pieces. These are for the eyes. You don't need to glue them together. Leave them unglued. And this V piece here and here on both of your face pieces. And all these 3 little V's on each one of these pieces. You're going to glue all those together first. Alright, now that I've got all these little V sections glued together, you can see it's already starting to give it a little bit of shape. A little bit there as well. Next, what I'm going to do is apply contact cement along this edge here and here. and here on both of these. And I'm going to glue these together, but I'm going to glue them offset. Alright, so I've got these pieces glued together. And this is what I mean by offset. You can see that there's about 1 millimeter, about 2 millimeters. About 3 millimeters of contact surface, about 2 exposed. Probably about 1 millimeter on each side. And that's to give it the look that it's a raised or separated plate. Once I have all these glued together and I'm done heating with the heat gun, I can also go back through and reinforce this with some hot glue. In the meantime though, I probably am going to run a bead of super glue, not on the outside of the mask on the seam, but right here on the inside, just to make sure that all these stay right where I want them. Okay, and the next thing I've done is I've glued the two center pieces together, also once again using contact cement. And you can see just by gluing them together, they're already starting to get a decent mask shape. Next, I'm going to continue by gluing on the sides. I'm going to start with one side, glue it on, and then do the other. I'm not going to try to do all 4 edges here between these 3 pieces and glue them all together at once. Heck no. I'm just going to do one at a time, okay? And where I'm going to apply the glue on here is going to be from this edge here all the way down to the bottom, okay? And then from here all the way around this entire piece here to the back side of it, okay? What I'm not going to glue on is these eyepieces. They're kind of tricky and hard to position, and on the first one, much like I'm going to do on this one, I just left them with no contact cement, and I super glued each piece on. Once I had heated and stretched and figured just right around about where I wanted them, I went ahead and glued them together. So I'm going to do that. And same with this. I am going from this bottom piece here and from the top side around. Now, there is a difference here. This piece here, you will notice, does not line up with this, okay? That is because this piece is going to overlap onto this piece whenever you glue the two of them together. So you're going to need to apply some contact cement on this edge here where the piece comes down and up around the side, transitioning, because eventually this is going to match up. By the time you get to here, you're going to be gluing edge to edge all the way around the rest of it until once again you get to this back piece here, and this back piece is going to be glued and folded over on this very end here. So this part is a little tricky, okay? Alrighty, so instead, I know I was just explaining to you in the last clip, glue this part together first to show you exactly what I mean. I was just going to freehand this and kind of guess. I've already done it once, and I made the pattern, so I pretty much know how it works. But I'm just going to show you. You see the black line there matches up with this. This is going to actually be glued underneath until you get to the point here where the two top pieces are glued together. At that point, it's going to be transitioning and gluing along this edge. Then once you get back down here again, this is going to fold over on the bottom here, and that's why I have this mark here. And the easiest way is to line up this corner here on the bottom with this corner here on your side piece. And bam! Draw your line, know where to put your contact cement. Apply your contact cement from here all the way up on this top edge. Probably around here I'd start transferring it over and putting on the edge as well, just in case. And then have it on the edge all the way around until you get back down to here. You're going to transfer back onto the side with your contact cement. Same thing whenever you apply it here. Alright, and here it is with the one side glued on. And just like I said, fully overlap here to gradual transition. And I did still leave an edge on this, much like I did with this area up here that has its edge here. That way it has a separated plated look. Also, the fact that you want the separation means you don't have to silicone that if you're the kind of person that does that type of stuff, or Bondo, or whatever you happen to do to cover your seams. Are going to have to do some cover work here, and of course dremeling on the seams just to help smooth and even them out. And you'll notice here, of course, both eyepieces are not glued on yet, and I'm not going to glue them on yet either, because I'm going to repeat the process I did over here over on the other side, gluing this first and then drawing my lines and gluing on this second side. Okay, so I have glued in one eye here. I did the bottom one first, and also left it offset like the rest of it, and then glued in the top one second, and both of those I glued with some regular old super glue. Okay, so now that this is all glued together, you're going to notice this looks nothing like this. This is, of course, the exact same pattern. Now, everything from the spacing of the eyes, these are way further apart. And this and the indentation here and the cheekbones, all that I do with a heat gun. I heat this and I put the shape into it. Whenever I'm modeling out the pattern, it has this shape. And once I lay it flat and trace out on the foam, it looks like this amorphous blob. And just to show you here as a quick example, if you notice, the eye here isn't flat sticking out, it's sunk in. So whenever I do things like heat this up and get the eyes pushed in, you can begin to see that it is going to have a totally different shape and look. But in order to do that, I have to use a heat gun. This is a dual setting Drill Master heat gun. I almost always use it on high, but sometimes I do use it on low. And I will use this to heat up the foam and put the shape into it. And that is the crucial step that will turn this into this finished product. However, like this. The first part that I'm going to heat and smooth out and shape is actually not the face. Always start with the top, going to the back first. And you'll notice where this is glued together, it kind of has a point. I mean, not kind of, it does have a point. And it's knobby where the seams are. To the sides, you can see another point there. This is pretty easy to heat and smooth out. You can do it by hand without the use of a mannequin head. This is an old canvas mannequin head. It's really sturdy, really heavy duty, and I'm not really worried about it getting too hot from the heat of the foam and the heat gun to catch fire like I would with styrofoam. So for this part of it, I don't suggest that you use styrofoam. You can pretty much use anything round. If you happen to have, I don't know, a large wooden banister head that you can mount to something, you can use that too. But I have this mannequin head. It was a gift. Sorry, don't know where you find them. And I'm going to use this because what I'm going to do, this is probably going to be loud. If you got headphones on, you're forewarned. Okay, so I'm literally holding the camera and doing this one-handed. Keep this in mind. So this isn't going to be perfect, but just to show you how easy that is, with just doing that, you can see the point is already starting to get gradually rounded out. As you go further down, you see it becomes more aggressive again, and there it's starting to get smoothed out. Okay, with just a minute or so of work, you will now notice that there is even more mark progression. as that V is almost non-existent now right through this area. Same thing with these knobby parts, they're now much more smoothed out. I will of course continue to smooth this out and work it out with heat. I will also heat it from the inside as well. Whenever you heat the foam, it causes it to shrink up. But I warn you, this is not for kids. If you're a child, have a parent or guardian do this. These things are pretty dangerous. Or have their approval. If they trust you to use it, cool. Knock yourself out. But, not literally. But, especially the end here gets super duper hot. You have to be careful where and how you set this down, because you can burn things or catch something on fire. So you have to be super duper careful with how you set this down. And next, I'm going to work from this area I've already started, work on it some more, and gradually work all the way back to the bottom. Now you can see this is so much more rounded. That point is virtually gone. And once I run over this with a Dremel and then a sanding block, it'll be totally round. And if I turn this to the side as well, it kind of had a squared off appearance, especially where these seams join together, and now you can see it is round. Same thing with this bottom area back here. This bottom area especially came to a very sharp point. If you notice in the last clip, I was talking about the heat gun and all that. Whenever you get to this point in particular, it had a very sharp point, and that point as well is now gone. Okay? And if you're wondering to yourself, well, why do I have to do all this heating, etc., etc., if you wanted a fully round pattern, there would be so many more of these V-cuts all over your piece. And the more seams you have, if you choose not to silicone them and sand them, or use Bondo or fiberglass, anything like that, and sand them out, you're going to see these seams, okay? Even if you just sand them, you're still going to see them. You're still going to know that it's there. And if that doesn't bother you, that's fine. But when you have a ton of them, it just looks bad. And now that that's done, I'm going to start working on the face here. And the very first part that I'm going to work on is going to be this area right here between the eyes. Okay. So for this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start by using my heat gun. And like I said, my heat gun is dual setting. And this bottom here, it has a 2 and the top has a 1, low and high. I'm going to put this on high. Okay, so as you saw there, I first heated the inside here, right in between the eyes, and then I heated the outside. Once both sides are hot, I immediately started to push and pull some shape into it, and already you can see the side profile of this now is starting to already match up much more with the finished mask, okay? And you'll also notice here that I heated this and pushed the forehead in. Okay, by pushing this in and pulling this out, I now already have like the center of my brow ridge. Okay, the next part I'm going to do is I'm going to heat this on each side thoroughly, and then I'm going to use my finger to push out the actual shape of what would be the eyebrow on either side of the eye. Okay, so you see there, you can already see the difference between each side. Okay, over here, bam. Over here, blah. You want this, you don't want this, okay? And as you notice, there's that seam there. That's part of the reason why that seam is there, is to accommodate what you're going to heat and push into this later. I mean, yeah, it does help to give it the curved shape, but it's there specifically because this is where the brow ridge is going to end up. It's going to come up through here and end up into here, okay? So that is why I have this seam there in particular, because it's meant to accommodate that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and heat this into the other side. I'm going to go back through and heat and work this area in a little bit more before we start to move on to the rest of the areas I'm going to heat. Yeah, so just to speed things up, so you're not just watching me heat stuff for minutes at a time for the whole video, I heated this area here on both sides, inside and out, and very similar to the other one, I stuck my finger up inside to push the foam in shape while using my other hand to help give it its curvature. And if there's fingerprints or anything and you don't like that, hopefully you can see on camera, there's one right there. Take your heat gun on high for a split second over that area. By running it over very quickly like that, you heat just the surface, and you won't really affect so much the shape that you put in it, but if you get that area really hot again, your shape could start to come out of it. But if you have fingerprints, just like there, you see the fingerprint is now not there, because I just heated just the very surface enough to take that out. Alright, so now that the brow and forehead area is done, you'll notice earlier, whenever I had this on the mannequin head and I was heating and smoothing out all this, I didn't actually heat or smooth out or round out this seam. That was intentional because I need to do that last. Okay, I had to do the brows first, and once I get all that shape in line, I'm going to go ahead and heat this and smooth it out just like I did all these back seams. Okay, so now that that has been heated and smoothed out, it has a much more smooth transition from this upwards, from the forehead up towards the top of the actual head of the mask. And next I'm going to start working on is the mouth area. Take this off of here. And what I'm going to do is use the heat gun, high setting, same as before. And I'm going to start with the inside. Okay, now you see here I've kind of pulled in a slight nose shape, or an area to allow for an actual nose, and flattened out this front a little bit, but angled it in here on each side, which gives it some of the definition I'm going to put into it. And just so this video, like I say, isn't uber boring, I'm going to go ahead and step off camera and just do some more heating and shaping into this area here, and also around the eyes. Essentially all I'm going to do is heat them and push them in here. Okay, and I'll come back and show you what the difference here between the two. This one I have heated and pushed in, and this one I have not. And when I tilt it up straight here, you can see even more. This eye has a pretty wicked cool shape now. This one still looks kind of blobby, or like something out of Spawn. You know, what the initial pattern isn't meant to be flat. It's meant to be heated and bent in. And whenever it is, as long as you align and glue everything up right, it doesn't look all goofy like that, unless you like that. It's going to look like that. Alright, now that both eyes are evened out, I'm going to start on the areas that are essentially going to represent the eye socket. And for this, of course, is another similar process where I'm going to heat the inside and the outside. Okay, you can now notice here, this side very flat. Over here on the red, no definition. On the blue that I just stretched out, you now have this nice bulge and curvature. And next, I'm going to do that on the other side, and we'll go on to the next step. Alright, now that the eye socket area is done, we're going to puff out the cheeks a little bit here and slim this area in. Okay, so that was relatively quick and easy because I wasn't doing too much. So I didn't have to really do a whole lot of heat on it, as you can see. And all I am doing is right where this corner is, puffing out this area here, which would kind of represent what a cheekbone would be. As you notice, I blew the heat down it, so this was also a little warm, and I just push this in while pushing this out. I'm going to repeat the process on the other side. The next quick area I'm going to work on is outside of this cheekbone area, and all I'm going to do, heat it from the outside, and just flatten this out a little bit. Okay, I'll give that cool looking shape to the mask, and it also helps to have this cheekbone stick out, so it has more of a skeletal, angular, scary, Deathstroke-y, Red Hood-ish look. Okay, so that pretty much takes care of the face, the forehead, and the entire back of the mask. What is left to shape is the side, which really isn't a whole lot, and it's pretty simple in comparison to a lot of this other stuff, especially the facial features. All I'm going to do is heat this and recess it here, and kind of pull this out in the ear area just a little bit, and I'm going to heat it so I can round out and smooth out the little knobby area from this seam here. And I'll come back and show you what that looks like. So you can get a look-see at what I've done here. This side is untouched. And as you notice, there's still that, get it in camera here, that angular point from the seam here, where instead of being round, it kind of comes flat and then goes sharply down. And that is from this seam right here, if it'll focus. Focus. There we go. That seam right there. On the blue side over here, I've already heated it. And you'll notice that that angular edge is now gone. It's round all around. I smoothed it out. I also heated this and tweaked it in here while pushing it out here on the ear. So when you're looking at the profile, you have the eye socket, cheekbone, down into here, which would be your ear over here and your jaw connecting down in, and the nose area, and that's pretty much it for the facial features on the side. I'm going to go ahead and put that same heat definition into this other side. So for the most part, I am done with all the heating and shaping. I may notice little things here and there as I go over it and touch that up, but that's pretty much it. And I try to get both sides as symmetrical as possible because that's what I want. Now, if you want more of a flat look, then you would want to probably alter your piece so this doesn't overlap and they both go exactly together. And what I mean by flat look is, for example, if you look at the Deathstroke mask from the Arkham games, when Deathstroke appeared in the Arkham Batman games, this side has no eye and is totally flush. This eye is going to be covered, of course, with the mesh, and underneath that mesh is going to be a layer or two of tulle covering this eye area here as well with the mesh over top of it. That'll help to black out your eye. Now, some people don't have an eye opening here at all. You can do that, but I'm going to warn you, it really is not good for your vision. If you would walk around a con with your one eye entirely blocked out and then try to drive a car home with both eyes open, it would take quite an amount of time for your eyes to adjust. And the other issue with that is the long-term damage that you can cause as well. And even having one eye blacked out, or putting a sunglass lens, or doing any number of things to cover the one eye on Deathstroke, even that isn't the greatest for your vision. So taking time to go to a cosplay, repair, and restroom if you have them, which is just a room where you go and work on your costume or just take it off and sit down for a minute, would be good, just to take this off periodically so that you are not hindering your vision, because it can do dramatic short-term and of course long-term damage as well to have one eye totally covered, which is why I always leave one open. Okay, I have all the heat forming, like I say, essentially done. Next thing is I'm going to use an exacto knife to cut in this line that I drew around the eye here. Once I cut that in, I'll hit it with a heat gun so that it opens up a little bit wider. And I used a Sharpie, a fine point Sharpie, to draw this on. And whenever you're scoring the foam, you don't want to cut all the way through it. You don't want your exacto knife going all the way through the foam. You just want to cut through like the top 1 or 2 millimeters of it. I would say about 2 millimeters of it as you're making your cut. Okay, so I've heated this, and you can see here that it has expanded, and I made a nice definite line. You, of course, don't have to do that, or you can do a different design, or just paint it on, or whatever. If I was making this into a red hood, I probably wouldn't cut that in. Maybe I would. I probably wouldn't. I'd probably do something different. And I would also probably trim this off from here to here so that it would line up. That's totally off subject, because the next thing I'm going to be doing is sanding. I'm going to be sanding using a Dremel. Now, keeping in mind that I'm going to be covering this entire side with mesh, including the eye, there's no reason to really sand out this seam or this line here. There's not. Also, the center seam, I'll sand it down, but I'm not going to bother to fill it, because that's going to act as my guideline for my masking whenever I decide to paint half of it this half orange. So since all this is here, I'm not sanding this. I'm not sanding this seam. I'm not worrying about the center seam at all, really. Unless it's off or slightly uneven, then yeah, I'll even it out. But I'm not going to silicone it. And however, on this side, I am going to sand this, and I'm going to silicone it. Sand and silicone this. And once I get past here, all these side seams here, they're all going to be sanded and siliconed. All the way around the back, and also this side seam here, and this edge here. Before I move on to siliconing, first we have to do sanding. And to sand all the stuff I just mentioned, I've already gone and sanded down all the seams I was going to sand. Of course, I didn't sand this one or this one, because this is all going to be covered with mesh. I did sand pretty much everything else with the Dremel so far. Haven't done hand sanding yet, and the Dremel is just to do the basic evening out. Any areas that are a little bit lumpy or a little pointier, a little higher, the Dremel takes those down really quickly. From there, to even it all out, I will hand sand it. I even use the Dremel to sand down this area and the side, everything, except for the two seams that weren't really worthwhile. I also did use the Dremel on this edge here, on the point that comes down, and just rounded up the edge a little bit up to where the plate stops. Thought that made it look a little bit cooler. And did the same over here, except a little bit more extreme, because the mesh is going to come down and match onto this and go around the eye and back to the bottom. So I wanted it to go down a little more smoothly. The first one I made, I didn't sand it at all, and it was just a straight edge, and when I put the mesh down, it just didn't look quite right. So I told myself, when I do it a second time, I'd make sure I get that. And the one seam I did not sand is here. So you can just see the difference. Like, I glue everything pretty easy, but even a hair, like right here, it's just a hair off, and right here it's a hair off. You know, you can, it just sticks out. So I put a fine grit sanding wheel onto my Dremel rotary tool, and I usually crank it around 15, a little bit under. And if you're wearing headphones, warning, this is going to be loud. Very sorry, but yeah, it is. Then focus, okay. Okay. And now you can see it is leveled out and evened out. And also, whatever little bit of like contact cement and glue I have gunk out, that's another reason that I use the Dremel, because it just rips all that right off there. Tears it all right off, makes it nice and smooth, much easier to conceal and to silicone. And now that the dremeling is done, I'm going to start hand sanding this with some sanding sponges. The first one I have here is 200 grit. When I'm done with that, I'm going to move on to this 320 grit fine. This does a great job. And for anything aside from that on the foam, I usually don't go to 600 or anything finer than that. Sometimes I do, but usually any smoothing past that I'll just do with a heat gun anyways. But yeah, I'm going to start off with this. And I'm going to use this to just, make nice, even. I'm not going to go super fast, because that can end up really messing up the foam. I've gouged into it. I've ripped little like tears in it. I've done bad things like that. So a nice even pace as I'm sanding. And that should do the trick. I'm going to sand all the seams by hand and the cowl itself broadly as well over the backside, just to help even out some of these little bumps that may still be there from the heating process. Before I do the siliconing, I am going to put the mesh on, because any silicone that I may get over into the center area here will make it difficult to glue this mesh net to it. Now, to prepare this first, I put some super glue on, and I stuck on 2 layers of this fabric called Tulle. And you can see it's just kind of like a fine mesh. I have some of it sitting here. So yeah, now that that's done, I've taken my mesh netting here and I've cut a straight edge on it, on this side here. And you say it's not perfect, but it's awfully straight. And I'm going to glue this straight edge starting from the bottom and leaving some hang off. I'm going to glue this entire center on first, up to here, and then I'm just going to hand trim it to fit the rest of it. And to glue all this on, I'm not actually using contact cement. I'm just going to use some super glue. Alright, so I lined my straight edge up and I glued it on first. Once I glued this on, and it's not fully glued on yet, I haven't actually glued down all this stuff. What I did was I trimmed out the shape here that I wanted, okay? And once I trimmed it, I just super glued it on and I stopped here. You'll see that it lifts up pretty much a straight line of super glue across here, and that's where I've stopped. And as I go down, I'm just going to glue sections of it down and then trim it into the shape that I want. Alright, so I got it glued on, and then of course I trimmed any and all of the excess off with scissors, getting it into the roundabout shape that I wanted. There's a little hiccup here because I had to cut a V out of it and try to join it back together. It didn't work out perfect, but I figured if anything like that was going to be there, I wanted it to be where the brow area was. Just kind of made more sense. And next what I'm going to do is start siliconing up these seams. Remember I said that I was not going to do the same side piece arrangement, and I'm not. And you'll notice these two are in the patterns, and the one here I've already heated with the heat gun. I just put it on low and went over both sides and went over it a little bit more on the bottom. And by heating the bottom a little bit more, it caused the bottom area here to shrink up more, which causes it to curve. And this was originally 2mm. After you heat it up though, it shrinks and gets thinner, and that was kind of the point actually, because I wanted it to get thinner. I don't want this sticking all bulkily off the side, so yeah. 2mm foam for these, and how they're going to get glued on is the bottom piece will be there, and the top piece is going to go here. Okay, now the side pieces are on there. I feel like they look pretty cool. And now I'm going to move on to the siliconing. And the silicone I use is by a brand named DAP, and it's called ALEX PLUS, all-purpose acrylic latex caulk plus silicone. So it's latex and silicone. It's also acrylic, which means it's water-based. So you can thin it out using your finger with some water and smooth it out if you need. Also have this applicator tool here. I got this at Lowe's. It's relatively inexpensive, a couple bucks. I don't know. It's not expensive though. Anybody can pretty much afford it if you have even a small income on the side. So, start by getting a little bit here on the tip of it. And then, kind of like you do with, anybody here has used Bondo. It's a little bit similar to that, whereas you can't just so much scrape it as you're kind of pushing and massaging it into the surface while clearing off the excess. If that makes any sense, I hope it does. Makes sense to me at least. If you don't use Bondo, I don't have much else to compare it to. But it's just thick enough that if you have like a gap in your seam or anything, sometimes it takes a bit to get it to become nice and even. And I've been getting a lot of questions lately about sanding, and I tried to address those in the comments as well as I could. I'm going to show in this one a little more thoroughly how I do that once I get this part of it all done. Okay, get this into focus so you can see there. The most white part of this is the center seam, and that's because I've got it in there pretty good. It's pretty even. But what you're going to want to smooth out here, if nothing else, is the areas right up to the seam itself. You can do the whole seam. That works too. But to do that, what I do is I get my finger wet by just putting it in some water and getting the tip of my finger wet. And then I use that to help smooth it out. And the smoother you get your silicone, of course, the less sanding you have to do. Whenever I first started doing this, I was using the full caulk tube with the caulk gun and was just squirting it on and spreading it out with my finger. I didn't really know any better. But as I've gone on and done this more and more and more, I have realized that the less I use, the better off I am. If I have to go back, and because it shrinks up, it is water-based, so as it dries, it shrinks a little. If I notice that there's still a little bit of a bump there, I can go back with a second or third application later. And that's all relatively easy to sand. It's whenever you gunk it up really thick that it makes it harder to sand. So sometimes you have to do a couple repeated applications, but if you're patient and take your time, it will. Okay, it took me about 20-25 minutes to fill all the rest of the seams that I wanted to, which are, of course, all these here on the back. You notice I didn't silicone the center seam, but as I said, I sanded it down. And I'm going to use that as a guideline for where the black and the orange differentiate. So, yeah, whatevs. And then also over here on the side, say luckily with these pieces, you cover up the side seam. Don't have to silicone anything. The brow here and here in the front. That's pretty much it. Compared to a lot of the projects, this is pretty simple. Now, as far as dry time, I think it says in the bottle 24 or on the tube 24 hours. But that's for thick extreme applications to set fully. So for example, like the BVS inspired Batman cowl build video I did a couple weeks ago. Check that out on the channel if you haven't seen it. It's pretty interesting. I used silicone in very thick amounts, and that you gotta let sit for at least 24 hours before you sand. I'm gonna let this one sit for a few hours, and then I'm gonna come right back and sand this down and try to figure out whether I want to do some more silicone or if I'm just gonna seal it and start painting it. Alright, so I've already gone through and sanded out most of the seams here, and some of these I have to work on a little bit more, like this one up here I have not yet sanded. You can still see a lot of streaks and blobs in it, but as far as sanding goes, I don't ever work it really fast. One thing that generates a lot of heat, and you want to take breaks. Don't just sit here and sand incessantly. Be patient, take your time, and just gradually work it down. Don't go all crazy, put a lot of pressure, you'll end up tearing it. Sometimes you pull it up a little bit, you'll get a little hole in it, and then you're going to have to go back and try and fill it. Alright, I got all the sanding done and got everything as smooth as I can get it so far. And next what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this Artist Loft number 11 brush. You can use whatever brush you want. I just happen to like this one. I had it laying around. And some Mod Podge, and I'm going to start sealing this by hand. First area I'm going to do is going to be this mesh netted area here. I really want it to soak it in and seal it up. That way whenever I paint it, it looks less like a bunch of little fibers and a little bit more like, I don't know, something more like carbon fiber. So I'm going to do a couple coats on this and also go around on the rest of the mask. And whenever I do this, I usually follow and flow with the direction of the mask and try to keep my brush strokes all consistent and in one direction, if that makes sense. Alright, here it is after applying 3 coats. Hopefully, as I move it in the light here, you can see the texture on it. How I was saying, I went in one direction with the brush strokes and kept them consistent from coat to coat. Next, what I'm going to need to do with this is go ahead and primer it. And I'm going to use a paint and primer in one. I picked up some Rust-Oleum paint and primer in one. This is, of course, a gloss black. You can use whatever brand you want. I was actually hoping to get Valspar paint and primer in one. Just because I usually end up having trouble with these nozzles halfway through the can. Not if I spray the can all at once. If I go through a whole can in one setting, then I don't have a problem. But yeah, once I get, you know, over the course of, say, a couple weeks or a month as I'm going through a can, when I get about halfway down, it starts to spit and sputter really bad. I don't know why. And I've soaked the tip and cleaned it with odorless mineral spirits. I don't know what it is. I will say that I do feel this design with the trigger in the front is much more comfortable and does have more control. So it's kind of like a toss-up. It's just that it's like $6 for this versus $4 for the other brand, but whatever. And yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and give this a few coats over the next day or two. Applying it nice and even. I'm going to do that over the whole and entire piece. Alright, so I've masked off the half of the mask that I don't want orange. I use this blue tape stuff. Always kind of on the fence about this. It does cost more. It doesn't ever pull the paint off, but I also have a really hard time getting it to stick. But yeah, whatever. And some newspaper, of course, to cover it. I have some Wicked Orange from Cratix Colors Wicked Color line. Then I'm going to put in my airbrush. I have thinned this out pretty considerably. It's still a little thick. That's okay. I am going to about, here in a second, to turn on the air compressor. Whenever I do, it is going to be kind of loud. If you've got headphones, you may want to turn the volume down. 3, 2, 1. Okay, as you can see there, it is going to take a while of me airbrushing this to get this a nice orange. But as you can see, I'm just kind of blotting it and spraying it on. I'm going to build this up from the front to the back. And certain areas, like the brow area here, are going to be highlighted, whereas deeper areas like the eye sockets are going to be low lighted. And yeah, we'll come back here in a minute and see what I've got. Alright, prepare for more loud airbrush noise in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so here I've been building up the color more and more, and it's getting more and more orange. and it looks a little funny in the camera due to the fact that the paint's wet and the way the light's hitting it, but I am applying it thicker, like I said, in through areas that I want to highlight, like the brow, and leaving it a little darker in through here. I'm going to continue to do this process from the front to the back. Alright, instead of taking the orange all the way back, I decided to stop there, but as you notice, there is overspray. So what I'm going to do next is I have some opaque black that I thinned out a little bit, and I am going to turn on the airbrush in 3, 2, 1, loud noises. Okay, so you'll notice how I was coloring in the eye there. My particular airbrush has an adjustment on it, where if I just push it down, all it sprays out is air. Now, when I push it down and pull back on it, it's a full stream. Anywhere in between is a little bit lighter or heavier. I'm going to turn this on and show you what I mean. Nothing. A little more. A little more. We're up to full stream. So by just pulling it back a little bit, I just get a little bit, and I can just sit there and color in a particular area like an eye. Okay, so I got all my touch-up done, and you'll notice this line here is pretty clean, if it'll focus. Okay, line there is pretty clean. I actually didn't mask this. There's a little trick where you can take a piece of cardstock. I just used a scrap piece of foam and bent it to the shape I wanted, held it in place, and then sprayed it and got my line. Still waiting on this to dry. Next thing I'm going to do is a metallic overspray over this entire side over here. Alright, and now I have my airbrush with the thinned out Model Masters Wicked Colors Wicked Silver from, or sorry, not Model Masters, Createx Colors Wicked Silver from their Wicked Colors line. And I thinned that out considerably. This is extremely thin because I just, turning on the airbrush, 3, 2, 1, just want to get a nice thin coat over this. Not too thick. Just so it's barely noticeable whenever it dries. It's just something metallic to help it to catch the light whenever the light hits it, and that should also help to obscure the eye area as well. Make it look a little extra sharp. Put a little bit more in the brow area, just like I did with the orange. Alrighty. And there it is with the overspray. Not dry. Look a little different when it's dry, but not too much different. So yeah, next I am going to let this dry. And once I'm done with that, we'll move on to some quick clear coat application. This is Treehouse Studios clear coat. It's some pretty good stuff. So yeah, I am always super happy with how this Treehouse acrylic clear coat turns out. We're going to talk about that for a quick second. A can of this was actually donated to me by a buddy who bought it, never used it, and it also has a permanent water resistant finish, which is interesting because some of the mats and some of the other ones from Treehouse do not have the water resistant finish. And this is, of course, especially cool for cosplay props, things like foam that aren't totally solid. You know, something gets splashed on this, it can just run off, which is pretty cool. Okay, so at a glance from a quick test fit, like you can see I need to put a little bit of padding so that it actually lines up right. And that padding is going to have to go in the back up here. So I'm going to go ahead and glue it in with some super glue and then do an official, looking pretty good. Just need to fix that. Right, here it is with the neck piece that I made in an older video. I happened to spray paint a gloss black. I thought it looked pretty cool. And it would be pretty cool. Let me get some shadow here so you can see how it looks without the light glaring on it so much. I'll put the camera in the way. You can see how it looks with the light back on it, glaring on the mask. Yeah, I feel like it turned out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. From just glowing a little bit of foam up in the top here, it fits great. Enough that I can turn my head without it flopping all around in my head. I feel like it looks pretty good with the neck piece. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Pattern photos will be up on Facebook as always. And if you want to buy cardstock patterns, those will also be up on Etsy. I ship within the US. I am going to work on putting up digital patterns as well, PDFs that people can download in the future. I haven't got that far yet though, sorry. But as always, thanks you guys for watching, and thank you for subscribing and supporting my channel and getting me up to 1,000. And as always, I appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.